Welcome in to the Hot Read Podcast live here on Tuesday, June the 10th. I am your host, JT Ruhnke, writer and reporter here at the 440 Sports Podcast Network. You can follow me on all your socials at JT_Ruhnke. Back today on the first day of mandatory minicamp here with none other than my great and amazing co-host, Stoney Keeley, editor-in-chief of the Sobros Network, one half of Football and Other F Words, and co-writer over on Stacking the Inbox. Stoney, how we doing, my friend? First day of minicamp is in the books, and there is a whole heck of a lot to talk about today.
I'm excited, JT. This is my on-call week at the dreaded shitty day job. So I haven't been able to get away, but like taking the time in between clocking out and getting ready for this show, kind of catching up on the buzz from the day. I'm really excited to talk about this this mandatory mini camp because it sounds like the vibes are at an all-time high.
Yeah, it certainly does. And listen, it was nothing but a stellar day for Cam Ward. We can talk about exactly what that means for it to be a stellar day versus no pads and not going full go. But objectively, it was probably Cam Ward's best day when the media has been available and out there. Put on a show today. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about Big Jeff's return today. Breaking news, guys. He's here. We don't have to. The sky is not falling anymore. People can stop saying, trade Jeffery Simmons, get him out of here. He showed up, and he seems pretty lighter and seems in good spirits, so everybody can take a breather. The gang's back together, minus L'Jarius Sneed. We can talk about that as well, and so many other things to get into, like the rookies, impacts, Callahan, Kevin Zeitler talk today. So much to get into today. Excited to do it with all of you guys in the 440 Sports YouTube channel chat. Good to see you all here today. And a reminder, if you want to join the conversation, if you're watching on Twitter or Facebook, or if you're on the Broadway Sports Media YouTube channel and you want to chat with all of our good friends over here, like Derek, who says, "What's up?" Eddie saying, "Good evening, lad." Cristoforo saying, "What's up, fellas?" Daniel Caribbean in the chat, Jacob Sane, Z Dean, Derek, Joe, all of you guys here today. The gang is all here. Jacob saying, "Do we like the later start time?" Yeah, we had to start later today because, as you know, with minicamp, there's a lot of things going on, and I need to get all my thoughts collected. So, but I think it's maybe you guys like it, maybe you don't. I don't know, but. We'll get into all of your comments, and as Joe says, the legend of Cam Ward increases. And as a skeptic, as someone who has optimism, I'm a skeptical optimist here. It looked pretty good, so we are excited to be here with you guys today, talking all of this. Also have to tell you about our wonderful and amazing sponsor, ML Rose Craft Beer and Burgers, locations all across the greater Nashville area, as well as our other sponsors, Sinkers Beverages. More on them later in the show, but we can dive right in to today's conversation with, before we get to Cam and all of that, I do just want to, we'll get the main part of Friday's show out of the way. Jeffery Simmons was here. Everybody is here and accounted for, according to Brian Callahan. For L'Jarius Sneed's sake, apparently you can be here but not be here. So I guess that is a situation that is ongoing. We'll get to that in a second, but Jeffery Simmons is the main one here, that he is here and he is back in practice. We saw today, participated in every single drill, from stretching to individuals to the team drills. His presence was one that we, definitely were probably lacking, I would say. But when he comes back, you know that he's there, right? Like, you definitely feel it.
Was it the first question at Brian Callahan's press conference this morning?
I don't think it actually got asked, because
I would have lost that bet.
He said, in his opening remarks, he said, everybody's here. And so, like, when you say everybody's here, he was asked about, like, what's the plan with him, having him back in the fold and whatnot. Um, like, you know, I think it eventually got asked about him, but once he said everybody's here, it kind of, you know, didn't need to be the first question that we asked. But yeah, he was here. And when we asked him about the reason why he did not come to voluntary OTAs, he said, you know, it was a tough decision for him because of the, you know, being one of the 8 team leaders and all of these things and being that big name and face for this team over the past couple of years. But it was a personal decision for him to train, to get his body right, to, you know, meal prep correctly, get himself in the best shape of his career, as he would put it, to come and compete this year. And it definitely seems like he is in the best shape of his career, because he said that he was down about 20 pounds.
He looks it too.
And he definitely does look it as well. Certainly after last year and the lack of production, it seems like from that, and also the losing and things like that, it certainly seems like Jeffery Simmons has a chip on his shoulder this season, and is looking to prove that he's, one, worth the contract, but also someone who can still be a game wrecker. And that's basically what he told us when we asked, you know, what does that accomplish, this new off-season regimen for yourself? You know, being able to train on your own and then get back into the fold. And the big takeaway is speed. He just, you know, it is a, you know, a big man's league, but you also have to have that speed. That's what makes some of the greats the best, right? You know, having that size, but also the quickness to, especially on the interior, you know, beat your matchup. And that's kind of what Jeff echoed, not for himself, but for the entirety of the defense. It certainly felt like a message to the entire defense. Here's what he had to say on needing to get faster, both physically and mentally.
We got to win faster. We got to recognize the blocks. We got to be able to, I guess, even just study better. You know the tendencies going into the game, and you know, no matter if somebody getting double the whole game and the other guy getting one-on-ones, you know, everybody up front not getting double. So, you know, when we got our one-on-ones, we got to take advantage of it. No matter who it is, you know, we holding everybody to a high standard. Everybody got to win at one-on-ones at the end of the day. And that's what we're pushing, and you know, we just got to do a better job at that. Like I said, recognizing and winning faster.
Recognizing and winning faster is what he said, which is, I think, a very fair critique of last year's team. The lack of recognition, the lack of speed on the defensive line, which led to not a lot of production, not getting after the quarterback enough. And certainly it feels like, despite the deficiencies maybe at the defensive end, at the edge position, obviously having T'Vondre Sweat, he can only go so fast at that size. It feels like Jeffery Simmons took a step towards being potentially maybe that guy, getting those sack numbers back up, being the guy that this entire, you know, the opposing team is going to fear on game days. Because then if you have a guy like Jeff, who is the guy being feared, it opens up a whole heck of a lot of other opportunities for both T'Vondre Sweat and these guys on the outside who may not be able to win straight away.
Yeah, there's two things from that clip, JT, that I want to make note of. For one, I've been a vocal critic of some of the defensive game plans from last season. I've said it on this show. I've said it on Football and Other F Words. To hear Jeffery Simmons telling the media, maybe we've got to study tendencies, be a little more aware of tendencies going into the games, I think is a step in the right direction. That's a positive development. Probably means a little more film study, probably means a little more opponent-specific game planning. You like to hear that. I mean, the experience leading to change, so to speak. It was not always pretty, not always perfect. You look at the Packers game last year, you look at the Commanders game last year, the Jags game where they ran for over 170 yards.
Patriots game.
The Patriots game when, like, Drake May has 10 seconds to throw into the end zone. There are instances from the 2024 season that you look at and you say, I think at the very least, it's fair to pose the question, how prepared was this defense? So to hear the defense's top player acknowledge, hey, maybe we can understand tendencies better, and maybe we could get, do a little more preparation, do a little more film work, that sort of thing. I think that's a really good logical next step for this defense into improving and being a little more consistent, and maybe being the unit we saw those first couple of weeks the entire season, ironing that out, so to speak. Then I want to mention the size thing, like getting faster, looking faster. Man, this man, watching the clips that have gone around Titans Twitter today, looks lean as he's ever looked in the NFL. And to me, I think Zedine brings up Tavondre Sweat being next to him. Simmons no longer needing to be the big run stuffer and can focus on attacking the quarterback more. I think there might be something to that. I mean, my first thought was slimmer, thinner, faster, quicker. All we need is the knife fighting in the offseason to get the full like Aaron Donald look going for Jeffery Simmons. But that's what my brain immediately gravitates towards, is like, this guy's thinning up to be more of maybe that 3-tech pass rusher that Aaron Donald was so for so long. I think Jeffery Simmons is a freak athlete. I think he's a nasty guy on the field. I think slimming down, getting quicker is going to aid him in the pass rush. And let's face it, the Titans weren't able to sew their edge rushers up. That need is still a need as we head into the season. So they're going to need sacks wherever they can get them. And I think, this is probably a positive development for Jeffery Simmons to lose the weight, focus more on getting after the quarterback, and maybe getting in the film room a little more, being prepared for defenses, saying all the right things. Again, day one of mandatory minicamp, but I think it's so far so good on that front.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about Jeffery Simmons, who at the beginning of the 2025 season will be 28, certainly is not old. I think there is still a lot of juice left in the tank for him, despite our conversations last year about how he looked. I think not only will this help him both in the the weight department, right, getting faster that way, but also I think it's fair to say that from an injury perspective, especially with that knee and the ankle injury and things that he's had in the past, I think this also helps him avoid some of those as well, not putting as much stress,
Fair
not
enough.
as much weight on those type of injuries. So I think that is certainly one of the positives that you can take away. And like you said, we can get into the Cam and Jeff trash talk, as Brandon Tyler here says. How good was the trash talk between Big Jeff and Cam? I don't remember very much of it, to be honest. I think we were all focused on Dan Moore kind of getting absolutely beat by Jeff Simmons on that one.
Good.
If you've heard the Jeff Simmons trash talk before, you've heard it many times. It's the I'm here, I'm always gonna be here, type of thing that was going on. We can talk about how Cam Ward reacted to that in just a second. But yeah, I mean, he showed up today and was a presence I think the Titans were missing so far in this offseason program, especially with the one where he just obliterates Dan Moore on the outside, as Daniel here says. Yeah, Moore got smoked on that rep, even though it was a completion. I would count that as a sack. It was easily the most obvious sack of the day for this team. But I think it also brings up a good point here in the chat. Like Eddie's saying, everybody's losing weight for the Titans team calendar. But, Coach Wills, I think there was a collective effort for the team to lose some weight. You can look at Tavondre Sweat, who said he's lost some weight. You look at the JC Latham weight loss and getting him back into, better shape, the shape that he wants to be in for this upcoming season. But also, someone in the comments here brought up, it felt like last year they were trying to beef up and they were trying to bulk up, and they're doing the opposite this off season. So I think it's an interesting approach and one that is going to be interesting to watch going forward.
I mean, you look at the results of last season. I think we kind of attributed to the poor play down the stretch to, well, they're out of the race. There's not a whole lot to play for. This is just a bad football team. But I mean, theoretically, it's possible. We heard JC Latham talk about it, how the conditioning wasn't up to snuff, and down the stretch, he kind of hit that wall. If that was the case for multiple players, losing the weight, getting in better shape, conditioning more, getting leaner and faster could theoretically help this team maintain a little bit longer, a little bit deeper into the season. Maybe this is some sort of course correction from a season ago, when the issue was not just that this team was disinterested or whatever people were saying about it. Maybe the issue is that they were just a little fat.
Yeah, potentially. I think that is I think that is a potential opportunity for them to get better. Daniel asking, is Zeitler the biggest offensive lineman now? Probably. We'll get to him in a little bit, but I shook that man's hand today, and my God, his hands were like 3 times the size of mine. I have little hands though. Like I have Kenny Pickett hands, but like, man, some big hands and a very firm handshake today. Let's get into Cam Ward's day, because I think that is the next logical step. And I know in the chat, some people are calling it a fine day. Just talking about his day in general, there are stats that you can look to, right? Went 20 of 21 on his attempts today. One of them was a pretty, I would say it wasn't a great throw from him. There was a couple not good throws. I don't want to say like stellar, as in like he was hitting everything correctly and like on time and like, it was a perfect day from him. I don't think it was a perfect day from him by any means, as well as with, it's hard to call it a stellar day in general because there are no pads and it's 7-on-7 and 11-on-11s, and it's kind of, it favors the offense most of the time. I would argue, especially in 7-on-7s, I would say it favors the offense a bunch, but then also no pads on the offensive line. It's hard to like gauge who's winning and what would be sacks, what wouldn't, those types of things, right? Can't really see more conclusive evidence of that until we get to the pads in July. But it wasn't a perfect day for Cam Ward by any stretch of the imagination. He had one pass that was intercepted by Cody Barton. Tries to fit it in over a couple of defenders to Van Jefferson. Cody, he misses the obvious route to David Martin Robinson, tries to go for the bigger route with Van Jefferson. Cody Barton makes a nice play to undercut the route, gets the interception on what I believe was the second rep of the day for Cam Ward. Then continues having some strong play after that, but there were some, like he hit Alec Iomanner down the sideline on a developing route, but Alec had to kind of come back and get the ball on that route. So like not like a perfect day from any standpoint, right? But really impressive on some of the throws to go 20 of 21. We were back to trying to fit that ball in the tight windows today. Absolutely, for sure. There were a couple, especially some of the first early routes plays that he was on. He was trying to fit the ball into the tightest windows imaginable. He hits Xavier Restrepo across the middle in double coverage, a ball that I don't think I would ever feel comfortable throwing if I was a coach or if I was the offensive coordinator or the play caller. I mean, just had to thread the needle
with a rookie quarterback.
With a rookie quarterback for sure. He had to thread the needle in between two defenders to hit Xavier Restrepo over the middle. Also hit Gunnar Helm on a seam route that was defended by Curtis Jacobs. We were having a conversation if it was linebacker 1 or linebacker 2, or maybe like an NFL starting caliber linebacker, would he have made the play and defended the ball?
So it's close.
It was close. So like he's challenging a lot of these windows, which I think is fun. Does it mean that it'll translate to success in the NFL? I don't know. Like that, once again, those are the things, like Cam Ward likes to make those miraculous plays, but those are what you would consider turnover worthy balls from
Yeah.
some metrics, right? So I think there is two sides to every story. In Cam's case, they worked today. Would they work in an NFL game? I don't know, but it's hard not to see the poise and the calm and the collectiveness of the quarterback. And that's what I think was more impressive and more stellar about his day. The ability to bounce back after his second play was an interception. The ability to bounce back from Jeffery Simmons smack talk and deliver a 15-yard strike on a third down play to what I believe was, want to say it was Chig. I'm not sure, but like that was what was more impressive to me. Not just that he completed all these passes and was making some pretty tight window throws, but the ability to keep calm and collective in the pocket, the ability to get his offense back on track in the huddle, still have command of this team. I think was the more important takeaway for me today. And Coach Will says, I love hearing JT is trying everything in his power not to overhype the expectations. Right. I am trying not to be this optimist and sell false hope, because there is a dangerous path to be led. That Cam Ward was absolutely excellent today. He was off the charts, 20 of 21, right? Like he was 20 of 21. But some of those throws were not the best throws being made. And I think, once again, we have to temper our expectations with a guy like Cam, but impressive enough from him today.
Well, a couple of clarifying questions I would have for you, JT, since I was plugging away in my spreadsheets all day and you were actually out at the mini camp. Did you get any sort of sense that there was a focus on today's offensive drills for Cam to maybe throw the tight windows no matter what, like to develop a sense of comfort throwing those? Or was the sense that this was just how the play shook down?
I would err on the side of that's how it shook out. I mean, it's not to say that he was pushing it in the middle of the field at all times. I think there were at least one throw to every level of the field. There were still dump out routes. There were still, he was taking the easy route to the outside. There were some, a lot of different play designs mixed in there without getting myself in trouble. There were a lot of different designs. There are a lot of different levels of the field that he was throwing to. So it wasn't all just trying to throw it to the middle of the field. But when it got to the point where he looks through 1, 2, or 3 reads, that's where you saw him try to push that ball into the middle of the field into some of those tight windows where he found Xavier Restrepo not necessarily making the most of the route, but like finding the open space. And that's where after 2 or 3 reads, he found his old friend from Miami for a productive gain in yardage. And so I think there was definitely a, trying to operate the offense just, like normal, not trying to focus on any one thing. It just so happens that, like we saw on tape, like he does what Cam Ward does, which is try to make these heroic plays sometimes on tape. And so far, they're working for him for the most part.
Yeah, so like the throwing over the middle of the field thing to me is something, like now's the time to force those balls. Now's the time to develop a sense of comfort for it, because I do think it's one thing that young quarterbacks struggle with the most with college offenses these days. There's a lot of throws outside the numbers. There's a lot of gimmicky stuff that we've talked about on this show. I don't think Cam, we've talked about this. I don't think Miami's offense was some pure spread, air raid, gimmicky sort of offense. I think there were throws that Cam Ward made at Miami that translate to the NFL, and even specifically Brian Callahan's offense. I don't want to give the wrong impression there, but there is still a comfort level with the frequency with which you have to throw over the middle of the field, and how you can't just attack the perimeters at the next level. So for me, now is the time to be focusing on those things. I'm not really concerned about his habit of forcing balls right now, because I want him to get the reps, that sort of deal. And to me, the thing to be focusing on right now is not the stats, the 20 of 21 completion percentage, that sort of thing. It is the confidence with which it sounds like he is operating this offense, the confidence he has to stand up and bark back at Jeffery Simmons after a play, the confidence to bounce back after an interception, which, by the way, everybody was like talking about this. Well, the only throw he missed was an interception to Cody Barton today. focusing the conversation on Cam Ward, and I'm over here like, hell yeah, Cody Barton got an interception today. Like, that's awesome. I want Cody Barton to be playing well for this defense. So I'm happy to see that. But the big takeaway for me here is that Cam Ward is operating this offense with confidence. It's a place that you want him to be. It's the foundation upon which he can build as a quarterback and hopefully as the Titans franchise quarterback.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said, which I think is a good callback to what we were talking about maybe a week and a half ago or so at the voluntary OTAs when we asked Brian Callahan, the idea of, hey, is it okay to have some of these days where you're just trying things out, not having, to be perfect? And Brian Callahan said, yeah, this is the time where, once again, we've preached on this show, like this is all in preparation of, being kind of a put up or shut up mentality type of team come training camp, because that's when the cut downs need to happen. That's where you need to see this team get into gear and see the actual offense and see it really take form, unlike what we saw last year with Will Levis and the struggles of training camp and even into the preseason. Things need to happen at a faster rate this time around, and it seems like they are. And so, yeah, we're at a point where it really is just try things out. And if it doesn't work, like with Cody Barton trying to get that route, it's okay. Cam came back and made the adjustment and was calm and collective, and that's the biggest win for me. Coach Callahan also had a comment on last week's struggles, the up and downs of last week's third down day, which we said, wasn't Cam's best day, but those are the type of days you have to have in order to become a better quarterback. And Brian Callahan was able to comment on those, and here's what he had to say.
A good day for him, and a good day doesn't necessarily mean a high-level performance, but it was a good day for him as a young player. To see all the things that are coming at him. He did some really good things. There was some cool stuff that he learned from that he maybe hadn't encountered before. First time out going against a blitz-heavy attack like our defense is, and presents a lot of problems, a lot of things you have to manage from the quarterback position. A lot of things maybe for the first time he's done. So that was really good to see. Plenty of things to coach off of on the tape. He understands things pretty quickly as far as what the looks are and what our answers are. He's done a nice job of catching up to those things, but really good first day. And then the red zone's the other area too, where things happen a lot faster. The windows are tighter. The recognition happens quicker. The throws have to be on point, and so there's been really good learning down the red zone too. So excited about all that process. There's something every day for him, which is a lot of our young players too. It's been good to work through all that stuff.
So yeah, once again, trying things out, being able to make mistakes is the whole part and reason of why this phase is happening, right? Like this is where you want Cam Ward to be. You want it to, instead of us being in June last year saying, are these mechanics going to make Will Levis work as a quarterback? We're saying, hell yeah, we're trying things out and, seeing these type of things. And I think that's a good place to be. Let's get to some of these comments before we get to some rookie wide receiver talk, more on, L'Jarius Sneed, Kevin Zeitler, those type of things. Here's what, in talking to Zdean's point here, heard Levis had a 50-yard bomb today. He did. Once again, I think Will Levis continues to be the best of the other three, and that's not saying much because I really am just out on Brandon Allen and Tim Boyle. Listen, me and good friend of the show, Easton Freeze, had this conversation once again today, in which I said, Tim Boyle just sucks. And yet Easton rebuttals and says, there's a reason this guy has stuck around for as long as he has, because you take one look at him behind the line of scrimmage. Don't worry about what happens ahead of the line of scrimmage, where the ball goes. But behind the line of scrimmage, you look at that guy and teams continue to just look at him and say, this is a quarterback who can operate an offense. Don't worry about what happens past the line of scrimmage, but before that. And I think that's a hard point to disagree with, because I think he does bring some of that intellect and can offer things, from the sidelines. But man, just once again, like if Will Levis does not get traded, there is no way in my mind that he is not the backup quarterback. There is no competition in my mind right now that Brandon Allen or Tim Boyle are even trying to take that job away from Will Levis. I think he had some bad throws today. Will Levis did. Like, there were some Will Levis moments from last year, and there were a couple that I literally said, man, that's what we saw every rep last year in training camp. And it was like 2 or 3 of them from Will. But then he also had his moments. He hit a deep shot to Io Manor down the field, which I thought was impressive. But yeah, there still is no point in my mind that says Will Levis isn't the backup quarterback if he does not get traded.
Well, I want to see Tim Boyle in the meeting rooms, because apparently he is like a veritable god on the whiteboard. He is a football master when it comes to understanding the offense and communicating it in the meetings. From everything that I've heard, like, that's the reason they want him here, is because he's super smart, understands the offense, communicates well. But the problem is, like, you got to play ball at some point. At a certain point, you got to go out there and do it on the field. That's why I think, like, they might keep Tim Boyle, but it's probably going to be as like a coaching assistant or something like that.
Yeah, it's kind of like the I forget who the quarterback is in Houston that they kept around for a bunch of years, that was playing right before CJ Stroud, that they've just kept around now as like kind of a mentor. I think that's the similar situation that they are in here. Coach Will says, Tim Boyle, the whiteboard guru. Zedine says, do you think Allen and Boyle being so bad keeps Levis around this year? Listen, if it doesn't, they need to go find a new quarterback. Like, yeah. Like, I think check down Charlie equals Tim Boyle. But the problem is you need to complete the check downs. And Tim Boyle cannot. White boy guru, the new clipboard Jesus. Like, if you want to be the check down king, you have to actually complete the check downs to the running backs and the wide receivers, and he doesn't do that. And that's why, if
poor Tim Boyle,
if Will Levis is not here, I think the backup quarterback on this team is on a different roster right now, and that's just where I sit right now with the quarterbacks. Some of these other questions here in the chat. Roshan says, Cam Ward was one of the highest graded passers over the middle of the field at Miami last year. Their offense attacked the intermediate middle hard. For a guy who put up the huge numbers he did, it was surprisingly few go balls, really massive plays. Watching the games, it was like 20-yard chunk after 20-yard chunk over and over. And it certainly seems like there's an element of that right now to the Titans game plan. I think it also just is dependent on the situation and the scheming of what they're doing right now in practice. But I think they're all, we're also seeing Cam Ward use that sidearm to maneuver out of trouble. There were times today, I think, that Cam Ward saw the pressure, did his best to maneuver through the pocket, and then was able to use his sidearm to get out of pressure, specifically on one 3rd down attempt that was able to move the chains. Like, we saw that on display as well. But for the most part, I think, like we said last year, Stoney, like, a lot of the plays were there. They just weren't being executed over the middle of the field. Like, I think that's where Cam Ward is just able to slot in and see those things so much better than Will Levis ever did.
And to Roshan's point, man, people kind of shit on this Miami offense, but I think he's right. There wasn't a lot of like go balls, heaving it down the field, that sort of thing. The way this offense was designed, they always, like, this Miami offense, these wide receivers were well aware of where the sticks were at. They seem to always have a guy hovering around the sticks, and Cam Ward, with his play extension ability, could go through the reads. And if the play wasn't there, I don't know how many times I watched him just run around, scramble for a little bit, get open, and then with some, crazy arm angle, quick release sort of thing, boom, he hits Xavier Restrepo, who's like 18 yards down the field, and the next thing you know, it's a first down. And they just keep doing that over and over and over. And I think that's where the bulk of his production comes from. Some of these games, he has these incredible stat lines, but then if you actually watch the tape, it's not like, you see like a 400-yard game, for example, and you think, oh, wow, shootout, big plays galore. It's not the case. He's so efficient at moving the chains, and the offense is designed, the wide receivers play to his strength, and he's able to execute upon it. So I think that's one thing that was a misconception about this offense for a long time. I do think it's something that translates pretty well stylistically to what Brian Callahan wants to be as an offense.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Coach Will says Tim Boyle probably carries his own markers like pool cues. I mean, there's a reason he's being kept around. Paul Woodburn saying must not get overconfident. Joe Blacko saying my only concern with Cam is accuracy. Seems like his accuracy isn't dialed to perfection. I think that's fair. I think that's what we talked about last week. Certainly is still not perfect, referencing the one Io Manor ball, but it's getting, but when it is accurate, I mean, there's no telling how little or tight of a window Cam can fit a ball into. I mean, the one to Restrepo through double coverage was insane today.
Yeah.
And I can say that because, like, once again, I would not call that play or condone that in a game ever. As Kenneth says, love JT try. I'm not trying to be negative. I just want to keep my expectations tempered to the point, like, none of this really matters until the pads are on or he's playing a different team, right? Like, I'm still, like, saying it's exciting, but there is still concern within that excitement. TJ saying it's good to hear Cam Def doesn't mind throwing into the tightest of windows, like we said earlier. Eddie saying I'm definitely not leading the charge to Trader Joe's right now. That is for sure.
I've never felt like more of a boomer than with the Trader Joe's stuff. I don't know. I like to think I'm chronically online. I'm in tune with what's going on. I don't understand the Trader Joe's memes. I missed that one.
I will explain off. I'll explain off air.
Something about some bodily fluids on the floor.
I believe that is what's going on.
Okay.
Brandon Tyler asked, do y'all see Callahan having a more aggressive style of play calling this year because of Cam? Last year felt conservative majority of the time. Not saying it shouldn't have been. I think it's aggressive by nature because Cam's actually going to hit the correct play calls this time. Like, he's going to throw the ball to where it actually was supposed to go. Like we just referenced to last year.
So I'll bring this up in reference to this question. I'm doing a study right now. I'm tracking the big plays, the plays of 20 yards or more that the Titans actually executed upon last season. And I've gone through and actually charted them. I haven't gone through all of the tape study just yet, but in charting them, I'm sorting through the games and I'm documenting these big plays. And for every play of 20 plus yards, I feel like there were 5 plays that just said Levis incomplete deep or Rudolph incomplete deep. So exponentially speaking, we're talking like probably a fifth of what could have been hit was actually hit last season. I don't think personally the problem is with Brian Callahan being aggressive. I think the problem was more or less execution last year. And so I think if I take that information, formulate it into a projection for 2025, Callahan probably going to be consistent in that regard, probably still going to be willing to call up some deep shots. I think the difference is with elevated quarterback play, you're probably going to see more of those actually hit with Cam Ward as the signal caller. And so the perception is going to be that Callahan more aggressive with Cam Ward because he's more confident in Cam Ward. Cam Ward's a better quarterback, but I don't think that's necessarily the case. Just want to keep that in mind. I think there's reason to believe that Callahan will be equally as aggressive. The execution will just be the part that sees the uptick.
Kenneth, I think, also does bring up an interesting point, and this goes back to my overall point with mandatory minicamp and practices with no pads on. Kenneth says, with Cam going 20 of 21, is Cam this good, or is this secondary without Snead and Baker Swiss cheese? Listen, I think it's hard for a secondary, even if it is 11 on 11. It's hard for a secondary to really play to the potential of what they want to do because of the lack of pads, because there really isn't the physicality. It's hard for a defense that's predicated on press man, especially obviously without L'Jarius Sneed, but it's hard in general for this press man defense to play the style of defense they want to play when you really can't put your hands on some of these wide receivers, when you can't hold these wide receivers in coverage to the point where your defensive line is actually getting after the quarterback and creating that pressure on Cam, right? I think that, once again, is why it's hard to call today stellar from a 20 of 21 standpoint. Not to say that I don't have concerns about the secondary, which we'll get to at the end of the show with L'Jarius Sneed, but I think that's, I'm not putting a lot of weight into that this secondary is bad, because I think there's a lot of good that can come from this secondary. Personally, I thought Marcus Harris, the 6th round rookie out of Cal, is getting a lot of run right now on this team. It certainly seems like a guy they really, really like. And is a guy I'm going to continue to keep my eye on. Both of the Woods, Xavier Woods and Julius Woods, getting a lot of look as well. But it all comes down to, Cody Barton stepping up today as well, I think was, especially in coverage, is kind of proving the point that it doesn't matter who wins the other inside linebacker spot, as long as everybody around them is solid. Like, is it really that bad to have your weakest position group? I think Paul Kuharsky said this on his podcast or wrote about it last week. Like, it's not that bad to have the weakest position on the defense be your second interior linebacker, right? Like, I think that's where I stand on it. Donnie D saying, wanted to note that I put this show on over Stillman and Company. Thank you for being a good show. We appreciate you, Donnie.
Thank you, Donnie.
Moving in on over from Stillman and Company to our show. We appreciate you being here. And we'll get to both the rookie wide receivers, how they did today, all 3 of them, as well as more about why I think the Titans, obviously the Jermaine Pratt news was a fleeting idea for this team, and then get into Kevin Zeitler. We got to talk to him, and then we'll wrap up today's show. But first, have to give a shout out to our presenting sponsor, ML Rose Craft Beer and Burgers, locations all across the greater Nashville area, including Capitol View, Franklin, Gallatin, Melrose 8th Avenue, Mount Juliet, Sylvan Park, and another location coming soon to Inglewood near East Nashville. ML Rose has the best selection of beer and burgers across the Nashville area. 25 beers on tap. Certainly one that you will enjoy and find for every flavor. IPA, if you're looking for something local, those types of things, they have it all, as well as a menu that is so hard to beat. And I think I got to the bottom of why we haven't heard about a burger of the month recently, Stoney. And it's not because they're in the lab cooking on maybe they are, but apparently ML Rose has over 15 new food items coming to their menu very, very soon. I've heard some rumblings about this on Instagram and other social media. So maybe they've been in the lab cooking, literally. Making new items, and maybe one of them will be a Borgonzi burger on the menu. We can only hope. But whether you like their burgers or their appetizers or anything in between, there's always something for you to enjoy at ML Rose. If you're going out for trivia, which they host at one of their locations every weekday, every week, or you're going to a Nashville SC game, out for date night, or just watching whatever sports are on, it's just hanging out with friends, ML Rose has got you covered. Thank you to them for being our presenting sponsor. And then also a shout out to our other sponsor, Sinkers Beverages, a 4-time Best of Nashville Liquor Store of the Year. Sinkers has the best selection of beer, wine, and spirits in the city. And when you go over there and look at their leading selection, got to give them a follow on their in crowd, which gets you special benefits, allocations, and tastings that you can only be a part of if you join the in crowd. If you can't make it out there, no worries. They have you covered. Simply search Sinkers on Uber Eats and they deliver the booze to you. They drive so you can drink responsibly over at Sinkers. Thank you to both ML Rose and Sinkers Beverages for sponsoring the show. Zedine says, yes, the Borgonzi burger with a side of gabagool has to be on the menu. It absolutely has to.
Yeah, I'm with it. JT, if I can speak to Kenneth's question real quick before we move on, I just want to point out something that you said earlier. Keep in mind, this time of the year, the drills tend to favor the offense as well. I have some concerns about the secondary myself. I don't know what's going to happen, what this unit's going to look like if Snead is not 100% good to go by the time the season starts. But I think it's also important context to remember, much like at the Senior Bowl, where we talk about how the one-on-ones favor the offensive players. I think the same is true right now, and I think that's important context to remember.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get to some of the rookie wide receiver talk here, which they have 3 of them, but I do still think at this point, they're not all the same on the same level. One of the major takeaways I do have from today's practice is that the buzz surrounding specifically Chimere Dike and Alec Ayomanor from inside the building is too hard to ignore right now. It's clear that the coaching staff, the players are so high on the 2 drafted wide receivers. The way that they apparently carry themselves in the locker room, in the meeting room, is not of what you would expect from a normal rookie. And then on top of that, the ability on the field that we're watching, not just to get open, but to create separation and create opportunities for themselves as well, is something that I think establishes a difference between those 2 and Xavier Restrepo. To bring this full circle, right? Xavier Restrepo certainly had himself a day as well, which I think got a lot of media attention, got a lot of targets, had a lot of receptions. I think there is still something too that, just like in the Miami offense, Xavier Restrepo was able to find the open space and make the most of his opportunities when in space, right? But there's just something different with Chimere Dike and Alec Ayomanor. Their ability to create their own opportunities rather than finding the soft spot in the zone, which I think is also a trait, right? But it's just on a different level. And from what we're hearing right now about both Dike and Ayomanor and how they are conducting themselves both in and around the meeting room, the practice field, those types of things, they're still ahead of the curve when it comes to this wide receiver room. Now, we do have a couple clips here. One from Brian Callahan talking about what he's looking for in his rookie wide receivers, what he expects them, what he can learn from them without pads this week. Here's what he had to say about the expectations for these rookies.
Speed at which they play, how quickly they can recognize things, from coverage and leverage. How quickly they pick up on some of the nuance that's required at this level with receivers. There's a lot of things that's on the plate. They have to be able to see a lot, and every day they come out, something new comes up for them. And I think the biggest thing is not repeating whatever mistake they made initially and continue to move forward. And again, the faster they start to play, the more comfortable you can assume they're getting. It's funny, sometimes you can almost see guys think when they're playing. And the idea for the receivers is that you don't want to think anyone rolling, playing as fast as possible, and that just comes with this.
I think it's an interesting point. Sometimes you see guys thinking as they're playing, and you don't really want that in your receiver. Certainly things to be watching this week. I think we saw all 3 of those guys doing more of just playing the game, and all 3 of them making the most of their opportunities today, which is a really good thing to see, right? And not to say like it's all doom and gloom for Xavier Restrepo, but I think we're getting towards the conversation of like right now, that 6 wide receiver spot, like if he can contribute on special teams, which we have a clip here of talking about his view on special teams and how he contributes. Like, I do think that we're starting to move some momentum towards like a guy like Xavier Restrepo may offer something different than these other rookies, but there's nobody really else on the team right now that I think is proving that they belong, right? And as Eddie says, the Bryce Oliver wide receiver 2 train has been derailed, I hear. Not a great start to camp for Bryce Oliver. Had one nice contested catch that he immediately follows up with a drop from Will Levis. Once again, maybe it's Will Levis's fault because how hard he throws that ball. It's hard for some of these guys to catch those. But yeah, not the most glowing review from Bryce Oliver right now. 2 clips from the rookie wide receivers. One from Alec Ayumanor, which I think is a really insightful answer from the young rookie from Stanford about trying to get on the same page as Cam Ward, the importance on being on the same page as Cam. And then also, like I mentioned before, Xavier Restrepo on what he can do to both make the team and also how he can contribute, not just at a wide receiver position, but also on special teams. Here are those 2 clips.
Hey, like, how can I get on the same page with how Cam sees the field? Because we install it with the offense. All right, now we're all on a similar page. But sometimes on the fly, things change. And to be on the same page with how your quarterback sees it allows you to make plays when it might be a little bit off script, you know what I'm saying?
What can Coach Bones himself, if you need me a placeholder, I'll do it. You know, anything that I can help the team, impact the team on, just throw me out there, you know? I've played special teams my whole entire life, so it's nothing new.
And yeah, I agree with Zedin. Such an insightful interview with Alec every single time. It's important not only to be on the same page, you know, with the install, but when things don't go to plan, I think is where these receivers need to really line up with Cam. And not just the rookies, but like Calvin Ridley. I think that's why you see that connection blossoming so much, is that, you know, when it isn't exactly structured, you know, Calvin Ridley is one of those receivers that Cam has recognized that this guy is going to adapt to what I need to do and suit my needs, which is why I think their connection has blossomed so early. And I think that's something that both Chimere Dike and Alec Ayumanor are, you know, really paying attention to early on here. And then with Xavier Restrepo, right? That's the mentality that we've come to know from the UDFA wide receiver, just being able to do anything and everything for this team, you know, being a placeholder, I'll do it, you know, those types of things. Now, can he do it well? That I think the jury is still out on that, right? Like, you can do it, but you need to do it well. And so from a wide receiver perspective, I think he's showing it, but I do still think that there's something special team wise or otherwise that Xavier Restrepo will need to continue to contribute to on this team in order to make the roster.
See, this is the spot where I'm indulging myself a little bit, JT, because everybody else is out there like, let's try and keep the Cam Ward hype down. Let's try and keep things to a minimum. Let's be realistic. And I'm over here like, somebody please stop me from putting my entire next paycheck on a Chimere Dike Rookie of the Year ticket. Like, I love this guy. I've got a Film Friday piece up on Stacking the Inbox about Chimere Dike. I think he has some crazy untapped potential. I think he can do a lot for this offense. I think he can return kicks and punts too. Really versatile guy that has the traits you look for. I think he was like tragically misused at Florida. And I would hope that in this situation, it can bring out the best in him. I'm also, I just wrapped up my Film Friday on Alec Ayumanor. It's going to be out June 20th, trying to get ahead so I can take some days off a little bit for around my birthday. But it's so funny to hear the answer about getting on the same wavelength as Cam Ward, because there is this thread through the offensive rookies that they drafted this year where these guys kind of look for work, right? Like when the play breaks down, they're still out there trying to get open, trying to be on the same page to make a play. And I was rewatching some Alec Ayumanor film recently, and I just thought, man, there's all these plays where he's separating, he's getting down the field, he's wide open, and the ball's just not going to him because Stanford wants to run the ball. I don't know if they even believe in wide receivers at Stanford University. But I digress. Ayumanor's getting open. Teams are bracketing him, like clearly paying attention to him because he's the only vertical receiving threat that offense has, and he's still getting open. The ball's just not getting to him. I'm watching him like plays where the quarterback is fighting for his life, which was a lot because the Stanford offensive line wasn't very good. And he just keeps looking to get open. He keeps looking to be that outlet for his quarterback. And I thought, man, there's that same sort of backyard ball element to his game that I don't think people have talked about a lot with IU Manor. That Gunnar Helm has a little bit of, that Xavier Restrepo we know has a little bit of, that Chimere Dike has a little bit of. All of this on film for a quarterback that is a known freelancer that can extend the plays with his legs. It's kind of that moment for me that I look at the testing. I'm really excited about both of these wide receivers. But then when you watch the film and you see some of these tendencies show up and how they sync well with Cam Ward, it's like the light bulb goes off and you see the vision sort of thing. And that's where I'm having trouble restraining myself from just being like, these dudes are going to be dogs. I can't wait to watch them play.
Well, let's hope that they continue that, but you also make financially wise decisions
Fair
around
enough.
here.
Yes.
2 more clips and then we'll get out of here. First of all, we got to talk to Kevin Zeitler for the first time today. I have 2 clips on what made him decide to come to Nashville and be a part of this, rebuilding offensive line, as well as, what is so intriguing about a guy like Bill Callahan. We've heard so much, but about Bill Callahan, and to this point where we know what Bill Callahan is. But I thought it was interesting to hear from a 13-year veteran's perspective of the type of coach Bill Callahan is. So here are those 2 clips.
First off, I think the chance to work with Coach Callahan, who's considered, one of the best, if not the best, O-line coach of all time. A chance to get to work with him, see the things he does and, give it a shot. Why not? On top of that, obviously, having the early pick, fresh, exciting new QB like Cam and, having him here, watching what he's doing, it's like, all right, things could change quickly and, time to go in, buy in, let's be part of that change. Very, very detail oriented. From day one on, it's been nonstop. Even when I was zooming in, it was nonstop, and that's good. You need that intensity, that desire for detail, the desire to be great every day, and it's infectious. And the way the group, they've been working, it's really cool to watch, and I'm glad to finally be out here being part of it.
How crucial are these next 3 days?
And so, I think there's a lot of interesting. First of all, Kevin Zeitler, who has been with, through good and bad on a lot of different teams, whether it be Cincinnati, where he was drafted, not having a lot of success, going to the Giants, then to the Ravens, then to the Lions, right? Like his idea that, things can change quickly around here with Cam certainly should give you some confidence that this team is bought in and believes that they can make a, worst to first type of run, but also, as Eddie says, it is funny how every O-lineman is like, he's the best O-line coach ever. And people think that Bill Callahan still is just not, is not really, is not that good. And I think that is also very funny, but it certainly seems like having a guy like Bill Callahan, certainly when it comes to free agency cycles, it's not a bad thing to have that in the back pocket that says,
like
hey, we have Bill Callahan to teach you. And certainly if a 13-year veteran who has been around the league and seen almost everything is still excited to work with a guy like that and learn from him, I think that is one of the best factors of all, in my opinion.
I tell you what, that's a big boy right there, JT. That man,
I was not lying when he says I felt like he could have crushed my hand in his hand in the handshake. I'm not lying.
That man looks like he could change a tire. I'll leave it at that. I think it's awesome to hear a guy that has played in this league for so long just say, I wanted to be here because I love ball. Basically, I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but to be at his level and to see the promise here, even though it's a 1-year deal, to come in and kind of stabilize that right guard position. It's another area of the team that, well, prior to today's show, when you told me Dan Moore Jr. got smoked in practice today, I was looking at on paper and thinking it's hard not to get excited about this bunch and the improvement that they've theoretically on paper shown in addressing this need.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And so he was a great interview and certainly seems like someone who, like you said, can stabilize this offense. Certainly also, be a teacher and a leader in that room for sure. Christopher saying he could change a tire on a tractor trailer. I think that's the vibe that we're all looking at with a guy like Kevin Zeitler. And then finally, just a few thoughts. One, I don't know how much of L'Jarius Sneed we would have even seen this week anyways if he was here, right? Like, it would be nice for him to be out there and around his teammates, right? But like at the same time, we know the deal at this point with L'Jarius Sneed, and it's unfortunate and it's, you know, it's frustrating at some times. I think you could even sense the frustration with Brian Callahan today with a guy like L'Jarius Sneed. Like at some point he has to show up and he has to be, first of all, worth that money on that contract, but two, like be a contributing member of this team. But at the same time, like we know with a lot of these different veterans, right? Like he may have been in individual drills today if he were here, but he wasn't going to participate in 7s anyways. He wasn't going to participate in 11s, much like some of these guys like Zeitler and Lockett and guys like that, right? So, is it concerning that he's still, kind of with Jeffery Simmons, like talk to me at the beginning of training camp and then we'll get into it, right? Like I'm not that concerned about it. Like once again, he's been in the league for a little bit now. He's won a Super Bowl. I trust him to be able to conduct his business, to play winning football. But yeah, I don't think it was too much of a factor to me that he isn't here for, at least participating in mandatory minicamp, maybe present, but not participating in mandatory minicamp because of a numerous number of factors. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, it is one of those situations. Like I'm not going to really be alarmed until the deeper we get into the summer if he's still not out there. And that is where things get scary, because then the conversation turns to, well, if he's not out there, who is? And that is I don't know how that's going to go, JT. I don't know how that's going to go.
No, I do not know either, which I think translates into our last little comment here. The Jermaine Pratt news, I think, was a fleeting idea. I tweeted out my opinion, not a source, even though it was funny. I tweeted out, I don't think the Titans are going to be really that interested in Jermaine Pratt. And then PK tweets like 5 minutes later, the Titans may be interested in Jermaine Pratt, which today, I guess if you can call it a source off, which it wasn't, it's my opinion. My source is, I guess it is a source off. The source is me, in my opinion. But, I don't think the Titans would be all that interested in Jermaine Pratt, kind of like we said earlier. It seems like this team is, willing to give one of their two young guys in Gray or Williams or Jacobs or any of these guys that they have a shot to compete for that spot. And it may be okay that that's the weakest position on the field. However, if you want to look towards a place where, this team may want to go find another veteran or figure out something, I think cornerback is definitely a spot to look. And I'm not saying that it is, a indicator that they could be interested in a guy like Jair Alexander, so to say. That would be basically the equivalent of Julio Jones, the Julio Jones acquisition. But, I do think that I would not be surprised if we get, towards the beginning or middle of training camp, and we see the possibility of them bringing in someone if the Sneed situation continues to go the way it is.
Trade for Marshawn Lattimore. It's only going to cost you what did Washington give up to get him in the middle of the season last year? Was it a first? No,
I think it was like a third or something like that. Yes. Yeah. Titans, keep trading away your thirds. Do it. Let's keep it going.
Yeah.
So
no, I'm interested in seeing how this thing plays out, because I do think there's the possibility of adding a veteran once training camp gets going.
Yeah, I'm with you there. That's the area where I would really look to maybe supplement that group right now with a veteran. But other than that, that's going to do it for our show today. Recapping day 1 of mandatory minicamp. You can read some more in-depth thoughts here in about half an hour when I post my takeaways article to Stacking the Inbox. Some more detailed quotes from Jeffery Simmons on his offseason regiment and things like that. But then, we'll be back Friday to discuss everything we heard and saw from mandatory minicamp day 2 and 3. Thank you to ML Rose and Sinkers Beverages for sponsoring the show as always. And until Friday, this has been the Hot Read Podcast. We will talk to you then. Have a good week, everybody.